Welcome to the Buddha Belly Life podcast. Today, I am so excited to finally be joined by Jonathan Hoban. Jonathan is a well-known psychotherapist who coined the phrase and was integral to pioneering the model walking therapy. He struck a major book deal with Yellow Kite in 2019, an imprint of Hodder and Stoughton called Walk with Your Wolf, a part memoir, self-help and life coaching book that explores the restorative power of nature while tackling and looking at the issues of burnout, grief, shame, anxiety, depression, and life transitions, and examines how walking and reconnecting with nature can provide healing properties alongside tackling these issues. You guys can see more about his bio in the bio section, but I'm so excited today to welcome Jonathan to the podcast.
How you doing?
Oh man, it's good. It's probably, how's the weather where you are? Because you're over in like London, correct?
I'm in London. Yeah. It's pretty decent. It's as London is, It's
Yeah.
No wind. Well, we've got a little bit today, and no sea breeze, so it gets quite hot. It's city heat. But
Yes.
it's blue skies at the minute. I've been out today. I've been walking out in nature today as well, and painting my flat. So I've been sort of doing two different things, but it's all good. It's all good over here in London.
Oh, that's great. I know you almost need, we were just speaking before the show. I was saying how I'm actually doing that too. We actually are just moving and restoring a house and all that. And especially being in holistic health, the amount of chemicals, because we had to get out
Well,
of, there was mold in there and there
mm,
was, like all this stuff. And so it's like, you have to weigh like which chemical, like which things are worse for us right now. So we're doing all that too. So you got to get outside and breathe some of that real fresh air to detox your lungs.
yeah, and I realised I'm 47 now, so my neck's kind of it's been
Yeah.
been
Oh,
out
yeah.
at, at all angles. And you're right, yeah, the fumes. I've got an hour and I'm out. So yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's getting done. It's getting done. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, will you tell us a bit about what you do? So, we've been trying to connect for years, and it's so exciting that we're finally getting
Mm,
to do this. But I was really drawn to your stuff because of my passion for mental health, and everyone who knows,
yeah.
what I train coaches in gut health and the brain gut connection in a holistic fashion. I initially wrote a book, and it was, my passion. How I got into gut health was mental health. And I love that you brought that movement therapy piece into, basically psychotherapy, and your area of work is so under serviced with some of these
Yeah.
more integrative practices. So can you tell us a little bit
Mm,
about kind of what you do, but like how you got here?
mm. Yeah. So I was a recovery worker working in the NHS, and we had these rooms, and they didn't really have windows. You had a gurney and very little else, and it was very kind of felt very stifled. And also, with someone sitting in front of you, it can be very intimidating if you're suffering from anxiety, or I mean, even I think if not, it's just I didn't feel it was really conducive to having an organic session. It felt very
Mhm,
pressurized. So,
mhm,
and we had a lot of mums in there with who couldn't afford childcare, so they had to bring the kids in
mhm.
to the session. And of course, as we know, having kids, if they're sitting down and not moving, they tend to kick off,
Oh,
as
yes.
well.
Mhm.
And it got to the point that they weren't actually, and this was not me, but they weren't being allowed by the services to have the sessions with the kids disrupting it.
Mhm.
So I decided to actually, for many different reasons, especially for people who were very highly anxious, we had a park over the road, which is beautiful in London, called Richmond Park. And I took them out for a walk, and the whole dynamic completely changed.
Mhm.
Number one, you're not looking at the therapist. You can relax. You're surrounded by nature, and nature in itself, the green and when you're walking through trees, it creates oxytocin, which is the bonding chemical. But this actually reduces the stress hormone cortisol. So if you're feeling anxious, it immediately lowers anxiety. And of course, for men, there's this stance that a man facing a man is also quite confrontation as well. And for teenagers, you want a teenager to sit in front of you. I mean, I remember having therapy, and this was part of the idea. It kind of took me back to when I was sitting in a room with a therapist sitting opposite me. I didn't know where to put my hands. the silences were so uncomfortable, so
Mhm.
uncomfortable. And this all disappears when you do walking therapy. And I have a lot of clients kind of go, oh, it feels like it feels like I'm walking with a friend. They said, well, I'm not a friend, but
Mhm.
we are still having therapy.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is it really softens everything,
Mhm.
it makes it very relaxed. And I think we know as well, I mean, I was born, well, everybody's got ADHD now, but let's say I was born with a huge amount of energy.
Mhm.
And sitting down, I can't do for very long. I need to move. I need to get it out. And if we look at emotions as energies as well, one of the reasons I wanted to do walking therapy, sorry, it's very long-winded, but one
Yeah.
of the reasons I wanted to do walking therapy is when we go for a walk,
Mhm.
especially in therapy, it helps what we can't verbalize, we can channel out through walking as well.
Mhm.
So we're getting a double release,
Mhm.
as it were. Yeah, and I started doing it. The retention rate of clients went up. It was just really high,
Mhm.
and I loved it. Selfishly, I loved it. I love being outside.
Yeah.
So I put my practice down, and that's what I do now. I do pure walking therapy. Yeah.
What? So, I mean, before I ask some other questions, I love that you touched on even the ADHD component. Like I said, I have
Mm,
6 kids. We're a blended family. My husband has ADHD, and it's only
mm,
recently been talked about and or
mhm,
really addressed. He's pushing 38, right? And we it was always like a joke though. I mean, because it was like, oh, shocker, you know? But the unfortunate part about us not actually digging into it, and I'm not a huge fan of like labels and diagnosis, but
yeah.
understanding the way the brain works is
Mhm,
really imperative for us as a society, I think, because we can
mm,
understand people differently instead of just reacting to people.
mm,
Um, and there was just to have to learn how to co-partner with somebody whose brain works the way it does has been
mm,
such a challenge. But that's what he's trying to do now is not only understand more about it better to the extent he can, but then also figure out how to maximize his abilities. It doesn't make him with less abilities than other people. He has super strengths compared to some. He just has to learn how to do things. So really kudos
mm.
to you too for not only doing what was better for the client, but for also finding your way in a niche, area of work that you were seeing an obstacle probably of yourself to be the therapist that you wanted to be with this, I got to move, I got to do this. I as
Yeah.
a sufferer with anxiety, I've had, I got into that a long time ago, but I had severe anxiety, panic attack level, everything since age 4. And so for
Well,
me, when my nervous system's out of whack, and especially now,
mm,
having 6 kids, like I did a lot of work on it, but now this life I have is challenges so much more of my nervous system. And
mm,
there's times I can't sit very much. There's times I go into my office and I got to like stand a bit, or I have to quit. I work 15 minutes and I go walk. I go walk and then I can come back and then I can work a little bit. And I've had to learn to read my nervous system that way. So it's like, I love what you're doing. People need more of that instead of being put in a box, kind of like traditional schooling or whatever, right?
absolutely. I mean, the thing is, I mean, we're living in an age anyway where teenagers are constantly on social media as well. So
Mhm.
part of what I do is actually trying to get people try to reintroduce walking back to people, back to
Mhm.
clients who come in. And I really kind of, weigh heavy on that point as well. When was the last time you went for a walk?
Mhm.
In your working day, are you able to kind of get out? Are you able to do walking meetings? Walking meetings is something I really want to promote because, I mean, I don't know what it's like over there. Over here, people are terrible about
Oh yeah.
prioritizing their self care during the day. It's
Yeah.
last on the list. But and the words are, I have to do this. I have to
Mhm.
do that. And I'm like,
Mhm.
you
I
don't,
can't
because
do that. Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's like, listen, well, when it gets to the point of burnout, then you have
Mhm.
to take time off.
Yes. Mhm.
Everybody waits until it's absolute
Mhm.
crisis time. And
Mhm.
my belief is actually we're far more sensitive than we give ourselves credit for. I think
Mhm.
everybody is born with a level of sensitivity, and it's a name.
Mhm.
We can't label sensitivity because of the shame attached to it, because of the stigma attached to it, the vulnerability attached to it. And this is why environments like nature really appeal to that sensitivity,
Mhm.
that softer part of us, that primal part of us. And part of what I wrote in my book is the wolf part is, that's my shadow animal, the wolf, very, very much. So that's the one I relate to the most, and everybody's got theirs. But the point is that we have intuition. We are animals. Life is pretty simple, really, but we make it extremely complicated.
Yep.
And society is designed in a way that absolutely traps us. Absolutely traps us. So this is why, if we feel trapped and we feel confined, we need to head towards space. We need to create space. Our mental health needs space. I mean, we are like in front of screens. That is not space.
Yep.
And I have not accepted, and I will never accept, that people cannot find the time in their day to look after their mental health and get out even for kind of 20 or 30 minutes. When I've done event talks, either with law firms, I've had, kind of agencies say to me, look, whatever you do, don't mention to them that, about the breaks, the breaks that they need to take in their day. I'm like kind of going, I said, how does that work? It's something I promote. It's the whole part of the talk that I do. So I don't sidestep that at all. I'm directive in and it's because it's a fundamental requirement. It's not a nice little idea that we need to have. It's fundamental requirement. So as you're saying, with 6 kids, it would be, even with my kids, how do you get them outside? How do you get them not sitting down? Because sitting down is stress.
Yes.
And I think we underestimate these positions, sitting down, not moving, and that. Put an animal in that situation and see how it fares, and see how its mental health would be after 6 months.
Yep. And one piece of that too that I find really fascinating is that it like what you say, that the employer said that, like, don't talk about breaks. Like, I was taught by, I have a really good friend. She does Neuralbased Chiropractic. She's actually taught it in London now. She's really pioneered it, and they have a 3-step approach, and it's chiropractic, and then it's gut health, brain gut connection, and then it's this movement therapy that they're working, and they do a lot with kids that are very neurodiverse, and even through teens, and what they've seen with brain development and function is phenomenal. And so she teaches it all over. But the coolest thing she ever taught me, and I use this all the time, I use it when I'm looking at my kids with education, or I'm looking at how my husband and I are functioning at home with all the junk going on, or my students even, is stress growth cannot exist simultaneously with stress. So thinking that we push people harder, you work through the day harder, you put the kid in school all day, make them sit down, and then send them home with more homework, and they're going to do better, is counterintuitive. Sometimes less is more, kind of like muscle growth, right? Like, if I just hit the gym all day, every day, and I never rest, I actually will see much muscle atrophy. And the same thing's happening with our brains. And that needs to be a concept that more people understand. And
I mean, my belief of ADHD, I mean, I'm sensitive. I'm highly sensitive. I'm very confident, but I'm sensitive. I can hold both of those dimensions in the same place, But my belief, because you're talking about exactly what you're saying, I mean, in terms of the stress that is kind of, the stress that's placed upon us. You mentioned ADHD. I want to go into that just very, very quickly. ADHD, again, I feel that, well, put it this way, I think everything's kind of smashed down, isn't it? Timescales and things are very unrealistic. I think demands made upon kids are somewhat kind of ridiculous sometimes. At different ages, they're expected to do this and do that, and they're not given the freedom that kind of little animals like need to have, right? And especially now, if you look at the amount of noise going around in society, my feeling is that from a very sensitive person growing up, ADHD is nothing more than a state of vigilance. My brain can go, and also because I'm sensitive and I'm creative, my brain automatically thinks of about 20 different things at the same time. It's very annoying, but it's also, but it's a superpower. I'm very spatially aware if someone comes near me. It's like, what? But this is vigilance, and vigilance is stress. If I'm in a very calm environment, my ADHD unbelievably goes. And I do believe that the brain, the neuroplasticity of the brain over the years, if you are around stress, and we are in a stress society, molds and develops a certain way, because we know about the maladaptive brain. It models in a certain way that gives us the symptoms, the presentations, as it were,
Yeah.
of ADHD. How can everyone suddenly have ADHD?
Yeah. To me, it says
You
it's way
know,
more of
come
a
on.
survival mechanism, right? I mean, this is actually your
Absolutely.
body and
Yeah.
brain doing what it needed to do or perceived it needed to do at any given
Yeah.
situation, and
Yeah.
kind of like me, suffering with anxiety and stuff. I have a lot of similar symptoms and find
Mm,
myself in a lot of similar places. Like as I observe some of my kids or
mm,
my spouse, I'm like, I get a lot of this stuff too when I'm in massive states of overwhelm. My creativity
yeah.
diminishes, my ambition goes down, my overwhelm. All of a sudden, I have light sensitivity and sound sensitivity, and I'm more angst about going out into public places where there's lots of chaos, right? Because my
Mm,
nervous system is just riding so high, and that's yeah, and especially like, but that's what your body adapts early on. Maybe it's your home life, maybe it's something like that. Maybe it wasn't like necessarily abusive, but it was very chaotic or inconsistent or something. It's like our
mm,
brain develops and goes, okay, I have to be able to anticipate threats or pain or learn to read maybe indirect communication so that I can see when something like this is going to come to me. And that's actually
mm,
a developmental factor. And they talk about like the amygdala, right? Overdevelops. And that's like the fear center of the
mm.
brain, but it's also, and
Yeah.
rumination, but it's also the
Yep.
creativity. It's the creative one.
Mm.
So you see these great artists and stuff that probably have struggled with mental health balance and all this stuff, but they're producing some of the best art and contributions to the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the gifts of sensitivity. I bring a lot back to sensitivity because I think sensitivity and being sensitive isn't talked about enough.
Hmm.
Being sensitive, what you're saying, in overwhelm, you feel everything so much
Yes.
more.
Hmm.
You feel all the energies, all the emotions, so much more. And I think people are especially creative who are sensitive because, again, you're taking all of that impetus that you were just mentioning.
Hmm.
If you kind of go out, you observe a lot more, you remember stuff that goes in the brain, it's mixed around,
Hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and so sensitive people are more easily, well, number one, they're more prone to trauma if it happens, they're more sensitive to stress,
Yep.
and they are far more prone to overwhelm. And that's why natural spaces for me have
Yes.
been and are for us. I don't think any one of us are a special deal. I think it just needs to be what when kids it needs to be in our daily life in
Hmm.
every single day. Because
Yeah.
if we look out at buildings, there are walls built in front of us.
Hmm.
We're basically being society is creating more ready-made cages for us, you
Yes.
know
Hmm.
and we need to find out the way out of the cage. I mean, look, you don't have a lion wake up in the morning and throughout the day kill about 7 zebra. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
doesn't happen. It will
Hmm.
it will kill and it will chill.
Hmm. Yes.
And
Yes.
it will sleep. It will have a
Hmm.
nap. I'm a big fan. Are you a napper? I'm a big. You probably 6 kids. Do you
I
still
used to
find?
be.
Do you find time to have a nap?
No, I used to be. I used to be so, and not like real nap, but like almost like that
Mm,
meditative nap, like just read a book and
yeah,
kind of pass out for a few minutes. That used to be my sanity. And I've realized, but I recently went through a lot of adrenal burnout despite my diet,
brilliant.
despite my activity and everything, probably correlated to some of my activity, my fitness. I don't prioritize my yoga, even though I know it's so good for me. I prioritize the weights and the hit and all this, right?
Mm,
And that's my space. And then my work, everything I do, I'm very fiery, right? But
mm,
my life is so intense. And then my space for
mm,
me is also intense. And like you said, it takes until the body doesn't give you another option. It took my panic attacks coming back hardcore for the first time in
mm.
a decade.
Yeah.
And I'd worked so hard to get them away. And I was like, okay, this no
Mm,
longer is an option. I got me a sound bowl because sitting and meditating is not
mm.
easy for me. So you get one of those sound bowls if
Yeah.
you've ever done those. And it helps because you're focusing kind of just on the tone, and it helps clear the mind naturally. And it is so good for meditation, just FYI.
I've heard a lot of people do sound therapy. It's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just the self-regulation
Mhm.
of the sound. It's interesting because I know what's the difference between burnout and adrenal fatigue.
I don't believe there is one. It's just adrenal. Like if they're going to measure certain things on adrenals, and they're going to measure them easier.
Mm,
Sometimes I feel like on women than men because of our hormonal
yeah,
fluctuations.
that's
And
interesting.
so like I recently did a test, which I'm going to go meet with my FMP pretty soon. But she did something called the Dutch
Okay.
test, which is
Mm,
I don't know if they do it on men too. So don't. take my word for it either way, but it's where you have to like pee on this stick and multiple times a day. You can only have 40 ounces of water, no caffeine, all this stuff, but it measures like all these different hormone levels at different times a day, specifically, especially cortisol. So we're seeing
Wow, wow, wow,
what
wow.
the yeah, like what cortisol fluctuation is doing throughout the day. It's one thing to say, oh, you
Mm,
have high cortisol in this one test, but to see kind of how it's fluctuating. Is it rising and falling at adequate times with your, circadian rhythm, your sleep cycle
yeah,
and stuff like that. And so adrenal fatigue is when, you can start putting together a chunk of system of
mm,
symptoms and things that start showing that. And
yeah.
the worst is the tired and wired. Like I try and explain it to my husband. I'm like, the tired and wired thing, like it's like constant angst, but also lack of being able to totally do. It is the worst
And, and
feeling.
and if you were an animal, what sound would you make in that angst?
I don't
What would you
even
do?
know. I don't even know. I'd probably be panting and like
A lot of time I found over
growling.
the years what creates anxiety, what creates depression, and again is emotion that many of us find really hard to talk about because it's so wild, is anger.
Yeah.
We talk about frustration and we use words to minimize anger. Anger's there. We
Mhm.
feel it. But again, you can't walk down the street and just go, ah, or like what
Yeah.
we can do, you know what I mean? But
Yes.
yeah, it's not going to be, people are going to, be pretty shocked if you do that. But anger, we have healthy templates for anger and unhealthy templates for anger. And I
Yeah.
believe that if you've grown up in a home where there is an unhealthy template for anger, we
Mhm.
do anything to remove ourselves from that feeling. And
Yes.
also, if we come from a family where we're not taught how to talk about our anger, it's not okay, or anger is just not done in the household. It's an
Mhm.
unfamiliar emotion. What do we do with that? So now, if you think about anger as an energy, and if it doesn't go out, and this is why I need to walk, I
Mhm.
have to walk. I have to channel it out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's got nowhere else to go. Otherwise, it will go in. And I start having somatically all sorts of different physical kind of conditions. I really
Mhm.
do. Anxiety, I know when I internalize my anger, I get anxiety. I can
Mhm.
get ulcers in my mouth, and I can
Mhm.
feel that shutdown, that
Mhm.
depression comes in it. And we don't really
Yep.
talk about internalized anger. We don't talk about, again, internalizing the energy. Our adrenaline will go like that. Of course it will to
Mhm.
that to that. So again, with internalizing our anger, increased adrenaline, increased stress, increased cortisol on the back of that, we
Mhm.
get a label called burnout, which is a nonsensical term. It's
Yeah.
adrenal fatigue. How can
Mhm.
you have two things that presented exactly the same thing but are
Mhm.
called two completely different titles? And
Yeah.
for me, walking and moving is what we are designed to do. We are
Mhm.
not designed to live the way that we are living. So walking therapy for me and walking meetings I love because there are simply no excuses for companies. Say to one of your colleagues, instead of having this like face to face, let's get out and
Mhm.
do it, having a walk. And I
Yeah.
can see it happening more. And it's really interesting when you speak to people, how is that? You can see them coming back after the meeting. I guarantee two things would have happened. They would have talked about themselves more. They would have
Mhm.
created more of a relationship with each other. They will know more about each other as a person, not just
Mhm.
as a colleague. It's a
Yeah.
bonding thing. It's a natural thing. It's amazing what
Mhm.
that environment does. It brings us back to being us
Yeah.
and who we're designed to be, for sure.
Oh, yes. And one thing that you said too that I want to touch on is the
Mm,
aspect of, like you said, labeling burnout or whatever. The body, and this is what I try and tell people in holistic health, right? Is as
mm,
much as we feel tortured by the symptoms we're going through, this is actually your body communicating to you. And I've spent
mm,
years working in gut health, right? But seen in myself and others, especially myself,
mm,
so like I've seen a lack of progress or even regression because of our lack of mental emotional health and dealing with past
mm,
traumas or stress responses and these things, attending to the nervous system adequately. And because that's their
mm,
body communicating. So if you are not processing something emotionally, your body's not just going to communicate that you're eating poor food or that you're not exercising enough. It's going to also communicate that you're not emotionally working through things in a healthy way by telling you in its symptomology in these stuff like burnout, adrenal fatigue symptoms. It totally does that. But so my
Yeah.
question for you though, Jonathan, because usually I cover this a little more in the beginning, but if you're comfortable answering it, is how did you get into this area of work? Because like I said, I train a lot of health coaches in gut health, and I sit on the phone with people, and all their stories are pretty darn powerful. And we all have
Yeah.
this passion, usually of personal experience, that gets us to. You don't just usually get into something like this because it looks like a lucrative career. Can you give us just a little insight as to how you were led here?
Yeah, I mean, I was a musician. My mother died when I was young. When I was 17, I was very badly bullied at school. I remember the first time I was encouraged to hit another kid, and I did, and I felt so guilty. I never did it again.
Oh
It
wow.
wasn't me. It wasn't me. And my mother was very unwell with cancer and finally died when I was 17. Whilst that was all going on, and I had all of this so much emotion and real confusion, really low. I mean, dead low self-esteem, very, very insecure. I joined the band. I started drinking, and that's when my addiction really started. I've been addicted to drugs. I'm still an addict. I believe I will always be an addict. I've had a couple of lapses in my history. I have moved to crack cocaine. It escalated to huge amounts, and when I've come out of that, the first time I ever came out of addiction, I had this guy called Ivor, who we called Dreads, and he was he was great. Made me a coffee, was very kind to me, and it was probably the first bit of kindness I'd had in a long time, and reminded me of what that feeling of kindness and love really was, because he
Yeah.
wasn't trying to put it on in some fake way.
Mhm.
He was very, very real,
Yeah.
and there were several counselors I had, and they really, really helped me. And because I left school when my mother died,
Mhm.
I didn't really have many qualifications, and I decided, when I come out of addiction, I needed some structure, and I said, "I can do counselling." I
Mhm.
actually went there to meet people, to be honest with you. I
Mhm.
didn't go there with the intention of doing counselling,
Mhm.
and I found out I was really interested in it. Wanted to answer questions within myself,
Mhm.
um, and it kind of went from there. And clients were staying, developing, growing. I was
Mhm.
learning more. I was learning so much more off my clients. A lot of what I've learned over the years is from my clients. What
Yeah.
works and what doesn't work. And I've been fortunate to work with so many amazing colleagues in
Mhm.
my career as well. And I've learned so much from them. And it continued to kind of interest me. It really did. And I love the work that I do.
Mhm.
Every single time I think about having a change of career path, it drags me back in,
Mhm.
because I do enjoy it. I'm very lucky with the clients that I have. They're absolutely fantastic. And I've lived many, many different lives through this job. I've learned a
Yeah.
lot about life.
Yeah.
So we go to the movies, we just see one movie about one person's life.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know how many movies I've watched. So yeah, that's how I got into it. Yeah,
Mhm.
and remain in it today. Yeah.
That's an incredible story. I'm going to be very proud of. That's pretty rad, and really common, right? Like a lot of people that we don't talk about stuff like that as much, but most of us who do this, and I will say too, just being how I am, and I have my history of all kinds of struggles and bad decisions and things
Mm,
that came with that's what we do when there's mental health, right? Like one thing
mm,
that we learn is that everybody's always doing their best. They're doing their best with what they have. So if they're not doing great, it's because their tools suck. This is the
mm,
survival brain taking over. And
mm,
but we overcome, and we can totally feel comfortable with where we've been and discussing these things because of the purpose we have in that. And I find that
mm,
while I'll never be like I always say that I feel like I'm always walking on a ledge. Um, you know, with this, and this side right here is like this really strong rope, and I got my beliefs here. I got my faith, I got my confidence in my purpose and who I am and all that, right?
mm,
And my certainty that there will always be light after dark. So I got all that. But it's like, but I always know the ledge is there too. So I never get too comfortable right here because I know that I've fallen on my face multiple times in my life. And I know that that's part of my journey. And there's something therapeutic though about working with people in their suffering, even in our own imperfections and through the roller coasters of what we process. I don't know if you find this too, but there's almost like I've experienced healing through other people sometimes. Like there's times I'll be so caught up in my anxiety and my stuff, and I'm like, man, it's really hard to get it under control. And
Mm.
someone will also come through with something or be really in pain and suffering, and I'll latch onto that and realize like everything else completely shuts out, which can also be the
I got,
unhealthy burnout part too.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's that thing, isn't it? I think a lot of the time I'll be instructing a client and going, am I doing that? you
Yeah, I
know,
know. Yeah.
back
Yeah.
at you. So
Yes.
it's a really good way
Yeah.
to gauge of like going, Jonathan, you're such a major hypocrite. Go away and do what you've just told this person to do. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's good that it keeps me on my toes, because I do walk away thinking, yeah, I haven't done it in a while, or I
Mhm.
really should do that,
Mhm.
more, or I actually haven't done that at all.
I know.
But that's actually a really good idea, so I'm going to
Yeah.
start doing that now. So yeah, it's good for that. And again, I get very moved by I get moved by life. I get moved by things that happen, and as I said, I learn from. I mean, I've had clients come up with just. Put it this way, it's I can give an intervention. I can think, oh yeah, come up with some really clever thing, or use my knowledge, and they'll come back and say one simple thing, either that I said, but I said, but it's really bit basic, or they may come up with some new idea of their own. I think that's brilliant,
Mhm.
and it really, really works. So I'm constantly learning the whole time. I'm
Mhm.
constantly learning the whole time. I don't think you
Mhm.
ever hit a point of not learning. And by the way, what you're doing with gut health, it is absolutely fantastic. And the older I get, unfortunately, well, fortunately, my body, our
Mhm.
animal,
Mhm.
just goes, oh, do you like pasta, Jonathan? Sorry, can't have that anymore. you
That's
know
yeah. Yeah.
I don't have a choice. I
I
don't have a
know.
choice. My body is going through a list of things that I love, going, oh, do you love that? Sorry, that's got to go as well. But the minute I change my diet, and you might tell me this. I mean, our body does know what it wants, and it craves certain things. Do you think we just deny the craving sometimes of what our body needs, or do you think it is just a lack of education of what our body needs?
Truthfully, sometimes I think it's
Mm,
a confusing substitution because, like, and
okay.
being a nature lover, you're gonna totally get this part, but like, it before humans came along and invented food-like substances, right?
Mm,
We were naturally drawn to sugar and
mm.
fat. I mean, that's in breast milk. We need that to survive. And but we had normal. I mean, what
Talking
are
my
we?
language.
Yes, right. So it's like, what are we going to do to OD on sugar, right? Do you know how many berries you have to pick
Mm,
to get the amount of sugar you'd find in one candy bar? I mean, that's a lot of work. The
wow.
richest thing you could find would be like honey, right? And if you've ever watched documentaries and stuff on some of these people in these tribes, they will scale these like 100-foot trees with nothing. If they fall, they
Wow.
die to get this honey, getting stung by bees to get this honey for their family because it also comes with nutrition and it's a natural source of sugar. And so we do have these natural cravings. But then we engineered all this food that's not actually food, that's high in what?
Mm,
Fat, salt, and sugar. So it sends the brain into overdrive, overstimulation. Our children are introduced to it. Their taste buds are just like blown out the water. So they don't want the food that they would have loved in the first place. They would have loved the apples
mm,
and the carrots, and they would have had the flavor of that, but we have just this flavor explosion. And then on top of that, our gut bacteria actually communicate a lot about our cravings. So when we're eating so if we have overgrowth of not so good bacteria, they feed really well on sugar. So you'll see more sugar cravings and stuff. But the positive, once you start getting your gut in check, you'll act and you start eating different foods, you'll actually start craving more of the healthy foods because your gut bacteria are going to support their food source. So if you have more, positive gut bacteria, they're going to go, "Hey, I need more of the food that feeds me." They're like people. They're literally like
amazing.
living creatures dictating stuff in your body. So I always like to tell people that so they don't just think that I have crappy willpower or blah blah blah.
We
But
need to
yeah.
get back and live in the jungle, man. I mean, that's essentially
Yeah.
what we need to do. I mean, yeah, that is, and I think our body can relearn, can't it? It can relearn really quickly. I mean, I've started drinking this. This is
Mhm.
water. I love it. I can't get enough of this stuff. I really can't. And I stopped it. Like, it's really interesting what you said, because actually my body forgot. I stopped drinking this, and I started drinking it again. And it's like, now I want more of it. I
Yeah.
remember actually reading something. I think it was an article. They said if you were stranded on an island for ages, the first thing that you would eat is the thing that you would then crave for years. You know.
Mm.
So if the
Hmm.
first thing
Yeah.
you had was a banana for years, you'd be craving like a banana and stuff like that.
Interesting.
Anyway, I
Yeah.
thought it was quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And so it's like, even in this modern world, and this is what you're talking about when you're talking about walking in nature, is like, these are
mm,
actually, like you said, very simple concepts. I think if we take anything in our modern life, we're used to like more advancements, the better, right? And we live in a
mhm,
technological day and age. So it's like more the better, but that's not true. I think if we want to look at our health and how our bodies and minds will exist the best, we look at like what was created for us when we came into existence, regardless of how you believe that happened,
mm,
what was laid out for us, because we were laid out with everything we needed. We had
mm,
water that had minerals, we had, food, we had, animals, but it was the way all this was done. They were all clean, like wild caught animals. I mean, they have high omega-3 content, almost like fish, as opposed
yeah.
to the factory cows that are, loaded with, they're eating corn and soy and all this stuff. And so if we just go back to what was natural, it makes a lot of sense that that's where we could gravitate more to now, especially getting into nature. We were never designed to be in a brick.
We weren't, and as I said, I think I'm building a new model, and it's based around sensitivity.
Hmm.
We don't talk about it. We don't talk about ourselves as kind of, we can't say that we're vulnerable. We can't say we create this protection and this ego and we need job titles and we need things.
Hmm.
And this removes us from the fact that, we need to look after our bodies. We need to look after our mental health. We are fallible. We are
Hmm.
fallible. Everyone's fallible. Wherever you are, whatever you do, you are fallible. It may not, some people have never had mental health issues. Some people never will. Other people will definitely have a mental health issue, but may not be able to talk about it. And I think
Uh-huh.
when we're sensitive and when we're scared of being shamed, we're scared of being embarrassed, we're constantly comparing, we're constantly feeling that we're going to be judged, and there's not this openness,
Hmm.
especially with suicides going up. There's not
Hmm.
this ability for, or confidence for us to say, it's okay for me to put my armor down, and it's okay for me to say I'm terrified, and it's okay to say
Yeah.
I'm in crisis and I need help. But other people need to be on the other side of that to really listen, and they need to be able to appreciate, yeah, that we are fallible, and this person has crashed, and it's not because of they're incompetent or this and that or whatever.
Mm-mm.
It's
Mm-mm.
because they understand that we are fallible. And being sensitive means so much more than just being, I'm sensitive. It means that, we hurt. We can get damaged. We need to look after ourselves physiologically and, and,
Yeah.
and mental health wise, absolutely. And it needs to be the top of the list, not the bottom of the list.
Mhm.
That whole thing now needs to spin around, and we need to be able to tell our bosses, go and do one. I'm really sorry, and
Yeah.
and confront the fact that we've got to be prepared to lose some things in
Hmm.
order to do that.
Yep.
It's
Hmm.
like, because otherwise, what I see is people ending their lives in from 50 down to to early years. What a waste.
Yep.
What a waste. We need to get priorities sorted in life at the minute. I really do feel that. Yeah.
Me too. Me too.
Mm,
And the more we're isolating from the world and we're creating personas online, right? Like like
mm.
like I can just make an avatar. I look way cooler online than I am in real life. Like that's just a fact.
I don't know. You look pretty cool. Yeah,
I mean, I like to think I'm cool, but
I've got nothing behind me on the wall. You got a whole sign.
I
Yeah.
couldn't. I would have turned it on. It's supposed to glow, but I couldn't find my remote today. So,
Oh, I'm
but,
gutted. Next time you're gonna have to show me what that looks like.
but yeah, but like identity. I always like to ask people this, and I think I had the blessing. I think sometimes if you come from trauma and rough stuff, if you are a sensitive
Mm,
person, right? My counselor was the first
yeah.
one that ever asked me that. She was, "Have you ever heard of the term highly sensitive person?" And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And then I read a book and I was like, oh, okay, I get this. But
Mm,
I think if you come from environments where you are like that, you are more sensitive to stuff like that, you're also more like not necessarily always grounded, but you're deeper. Like I like to think that
Mm,
like you observe a lot of other people and what's really important to you. Because I always like I like to ask people, I'm like, who would you be? Like what would you wake up for in the morning that's not a person, thing, or
mhm.
a substance? What do you wake up for? And most people can't answer that. Most people can't answer that. A person, a thing, or a
Mm,
substance. And what we realize is that most everyone is caught up in this
mm,
society's way of living where it's,
yeah.
what we obtain, the money, our status, our power, and all that. And don't get me wrong, like I like to achieve my goals. Like you're a published author. Like I guarantee that feels
Mm,
that is exciting. That is everything, right? And but it's like an accessory, right? Because in the end, if I'm in a car accident and I lose my legs, I actually work. I've been in some environments with groups with addiction and mental health and stuff, and I am part of some of these groups too. And it's really cool because whether I'm speaking on a platform in front of people, whether I'm getting paid or it's something big deal, or
mm,
whether I'm in these intimate settings in places where maybe a lot of people wouldn't want to choose to be, they're harder places to sit and
mm,
rougher environment. They're rough.
mm,
Um, I'm the same person. So take my legs,
yeah.
take my money, take my house. Like I know who I am. And I think like we could empower this more in people and we'd see such a difference with mental health
Mm,
because we'd all let that crap go. We'd let go of what
yeah.
society thinks I'm successful enough, if I'm doing this, if I'm blah 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 blah, if I'm attractive enough or blah, all this
And what it makes our emotional and our emotional world so fragile, because if any
yes,
one of those things gets affected,
yes,
yeah, if we lose money, if we lose our home, our whole inner world changes. If that is what it's sitting on, best of luck with that. It makes it very fragile indeed, you know.
that's so true.
Mm,
Yep. And so it's almost like empowerment. I mean, if you want to have a quality of life, then make yourself more bomb proof. And how we become bomb proof is by solidifying ourselves in an intangible identity and releasing all the
yeah.
rest. And you can play with it. You want to go be, a millionaire and own a yacht or something. The thing is I might have goals, but I'm not attached to anything. And I realize that that's what makes me so free. It makes me more mentally and
Mm,
emotionally free. It's just my children. Like I'm
absolutely.
attached to my kids, but
Mm.
everything else, you take it or leave it. Like maybe I want a
It
car,
comes.
maybe I don't care.
It comes and it goes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
My best friend of 27 years, died suddenly over a year ago,
Oh.
and it broke me.
Mhm.
It absolutely broke me. Now, if I looked around, I mean, it felt like an amputation of a part of me.
Mhm.
That's the only way I can describe it. And there's still a massive void, as it is for loads of people that knew him and loved him. And really, it's something that can't instantly be filled, and probably will never be filled. But I can tell you one thing: in that moment when I was looking around, it was just like, we all have these moments in life with the things that we put so much importance to. In those moments, they suddenly don't matter anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
They suddenly don't matter anymore,
Mhm.
and I think if you could bottle that and hold on to that, you
Yes.
know it really, I remember working in a hospice, and it was the things I wish these are the things I'd hear more often. I wish I'd experienced more. I wish I was in contact with certain friends. you
Yep.
know I wish I just kind of, it's about experiencing life, but it's about the simple things.
Mhm.
It's not complicated. We make it complicated.
Mhm.
So, and we need to step back, and we need to stand still and step back, and that's, check out this segue. That's what makes nature such a great place to
Yes.
stand back, to
Mhm.
step back, to get some perspective.
Mhm.
Cortisol comes down, all the things that we push to outside the periphery come back in.
Mhm.
Because when was the last time, whoever's listened to this, are there certain friends you haven't spoken to in a while?
Mhm.
Your loved ones, your family, have you kind of had a look around and see what's happening for them? Have you asked questions about what's happening with them? What's
Mhm.
happening in their
Mhm.
life? How are they doing?
Yeah.
Does
Mhm.
someone need a hand? You walk down the street and not think about considering helping someone, or talking to someone that you may have never even met before. Just go and say hello,
Mhm.
have a chat.
Yeah.
You might,
Mhm.
someone opens up and tell you about their life. It's like, wow,
Mhm.
these are the things, these are the gifts. They're very simple, they're very small, but they are so powerful, and it's what
Yeah.
life is about. It is.
Yeah.
And all of these things you can get on a walk, just to let you know. So yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Oh, I love it. And even with like I've noticed because you talk about the difference between the importance of walking versus being sedentary, but I even want to
mm,
add to that something I had to learn was implementing walking as a gym goer, as a weight, lifting weights and doing the hit and all the intense
mm,
exercise. Like really, again, what was I created to do? I was created to be able to do that, but not necessarily to only do that. And so my body was just locked up all the time because I was going, hitting these intense workouts, getting my
yeah,
burn for the day. And then I was having to sit behind a computer and my body was just locking up. And I was missing more of that mundane movement that actually calmed my nervous
mm,
system and brought
nice.
things down. And I've had to start shifting that and realizing like what a silly thing. Like I should not be coming to this at 38. Like that's so ridiculous. But that's all right.
Listen,
I love that.
38, 6 kids in, you're a legend. You're an absolute legend. And looking as
Oh,
well
you're
as you
sweet.
do, you're an absolute legend. You really, really are. Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
thank
And I
you.
think again, when you're sitting down, I agree. 'Cause sitting down, it's like I think so. I sat on a tree the other day. It was nice. I was just feeling the bark, and it was nice. And you sit on the grass, especially when it's summer.
Mhm,
You take
mhm.
your socks off and you put your feet on the grass. And I've not done that in a while. I might try and do that tomorrow. These things make me happy. They make me
Yeah.
happy. They make me very, very happy indeed.
Mhm.
But it's funny, the things that make us happy, we tend to kind of stop us. We stop ourselves from doing it. It's quite
Yes.
an interesting thing, isn't it? Yeah,
Because we
yeah,
we we confuse happiness, I believe this, happiness with
mm.
stimulation.
Yes,
Happiness is not stimulation. My
mm.
kids do that, right? We
Brilliant.
really cut their
Yeah.
cut their their screen time. They were being little, you know what? And and it just wasn't good for their
Yeah.
brain. But all of a sudden, if they're on their screens a bunch, then they get out and they're like, "There's nothing to do with my life. Everything sucks. I'm
Mm,
bored." Da, da, da. They're aggressive. They're agitated, and I'm
mm,
like, "Oh my goodness!" So we cut it way back, and guess what they were doing? They were playing. They were actually having fun. Whereas what they were doing on the computer, maybe it seemed fun, but it was more stimulating. So they were used to this drug
mm,
hit essentially of
mm,
stimulation, and then when they don't have
mm.
the stimulation, they're crashing. And I'm like, stimulation is
Yeah.
not necessarily happiness. It can go hand in hand, but happiness sometimes is usually more simple and mundane.
Yeah.
Joy.
Do you have that kind of don't mess with mama look? Do you have that look?
Oh
And when
yeah.
you tell your
Like,
kids, if like, yeah,
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 I'm
okay.
I'm I'm the hard one in the family. Like I try the love and logic parenting, especially as a
Mm,
step parent. Like you also have to adapt these whole different
mm,
set of skills because it's a
mm.
different ballgame. Like I can just, get my kids, I've trained them their whole life. I get how it goes. I can have good days and bad days and not feel like I'm going to ruin their life or they're going to hate me, but when you're a step parent, it's a whole different thing. So the love and logic, the patience of that. And oh my
Well, the
goodness.
reason I asked that as well is because again, it's when we get to that place of I'm going to go. That's the level of stimulation that's going on for the kids.
Yes.
Exactly what you said. It's such a good word that you used, stimulation. And everything about our life right now is stimulation, isn't it? So
Yeah.
yeah, as you said, I can get very excitable. I need to regulate. I need to regulate. Otherwise, I'll be looking, let's say, I'll be craving. Even now, I'll be craving things medicinally.
Mhm.
Alcohol and drugs for me is I still go to meetings still. I
Mhm.
go to
Yeah.
meetings today, AA meetings, NA meetings. I go there because I need to remind myself
Mhm.
not to pick up a drink and not to pick up a drug in my life, because
Yeah.
if I do that, things go sideways. They really, really
Mhm.
do. And
Mhm.
I've had that experience in my life. Like, a lot of people who have been kind of 18 or 20 or 22 years clean, it, it, they don't prioritize that. They will pick up,
Mhm.
that's what
Mhm.
happens. So something's great about being, anyone who's an addict out there, the great thing about being an addict is actually when the road gets narrower, you don't have the choice to be able to do that anymore. You
Mhm.
don't. But
Mhm.
we're a lot more hyper vigilant around doing the things that we need to do for
Yeah.
us.
Yes.
Um, but again, I think I've been very communication with family and communication with friends um, is key. And when we get so caught up in our lives, whether it be through when it goes bad, either through addiction or even without that. We get addicted to work, we get addicted to this, we get addicted to that. But communication goes down. And when we break that communication with others, we break that communication with ourselves, or even the other way around. We break down the communication with ourselves and we break it down with others. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So walking is a great space to kind of get that communication going with ourselves again, that internal relationship. What's going on with me? How am I feeling? What's actually going on? What do I need? You know, you're rushing around the whole time. You don't have time to stop and think about what do I need? Yeah.
Yeah. And or even like, that's why people have like shower thoughts. Have you ever been like a genius in the shower? Like some people are. I get the same thing after not necessarily an intense workout, usually more of a walking or things like that. And it's because my nervous system calms down enough that then my brain starts doing what it needs to do. It's more insightful. It's maybe I'm feeling sad about something. Maybe I'm more emotional. Maybe I'm more inspired and creative and all that. It's like all of a sudden this function starts happening because I'm getting out of stimulation. Brilliant concept.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up and let you, thank you for sitting here for the almost entire hour. I totally get that. I was joking with my husband that he starts yawning 10 seconds into a sentence I have. Like he really will, like, because especially with his ADHD, I've had to learn what not to take personal anymore because I'm like a talker and he's like, but if I walk with it, I think actually I need to try that. Like we need to go on a walk because then I can get him more on my level of connection and he can move his body.
He's got nowhere to run, man. That's the other thing. He's got nowhere to run. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So if you have way more people, especially men, suffer then, and I think most people are just so disconnected with themselves, with their emotions, their how their brain functions, and then how they're labeled by the outside world, by how they were raised, what their parents maybe ingrained, and what society tells. And so I think a lot of people, like I said, especially men, are so disconnected from actually their real strength, like their true strength, because there's confidence in honesty of something. That's how you move past stuff. Because if we can't bring our shadows out, then they infect us, because we're so afraid to do that. And so what's like the biggest thing that you could tell people, I think, especially those like that you would ever want to leave people with, especially men, because women have a lot of this, I think, in their support, but especially men, what would be like your biggest message to them about their mental health and about life in general?
Put down your pride.
And what's on the other side of that pride, do you think?
Vulnerability. And kind of just doing something that, maybe we're born to protect, we're born to kind of attack, we're born to do the manly things. What a bunch of bullshit. I mean, it's kind of, we have all of that, but we feel, we can be shy. We don't have to be tough. We don't have to have all this stuff. But the pride thing for me is the number one killer of men, I feel. I really, really do, because it's with the ego as well, but the pride is the protection of when we open up, we don't feel safe. But what I would say is, by taking that leap and by allowing yourself just to open up a little bit, maybe not a huge bit to start with, a little bit, and also most importantly to the right person, the world doesn't end, and you might survive that feeling and go, actually, I feel a little better for opening up. And look, I'm still a man, but I think this whole image of like, you're a man, you can't talk about your feelings. Look, I think you could have that conversation with yourself a million times. Just do it. Just give it a go. Don't even think it. Just do it. And the more you do it, the easier it will get. And also, you're giving someone else the opportunity to open up as well. That's the thing that is so forgotten with guys. It's always it's really lovely to watch, and it's always when guys get drunk and then they're suddenly talking, right? All of a sudden, then it's come to. But then the next morning, they're like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I told you that." So pride and shame, they come together. Pride is the thing that locks it, and shame is the thing that shuts it down if someone has opened up again. And those two things, just need to kind of be challenged, you know. And a lot of people think, well, why should I go out of my way to challenge yourself? If you want to grow, you've got to challenge yourself, and you've got to move yourself out of your comfort zone. And if you don't, your body will let you know. You know,
Yeah.
it will let you know. So that would be what the message is. But pride is the number one thing, and learn challenging yourself to talk about your feelings more, but to the right person, and give them the opportunity to talk about themselves. And when they do, listen as well. Something I'm not very good at, believe it
Yeah.
or not. It's ironic, isn't it? As a psychotherapist, wow, you know,
I get that.
who would have thought
I
it?
struggle
Yeah,
too sometimes
yeah.
because I want to interact with
My
it, right?
God,
You want to jump
yeah.
in the thing, and it's
Oh,
not always that you just don't have a regard for other people, but it's that you want to like get in on it sometimes too. And yeah, that's one of my greatest things to learn too.
it's my low self-worth and my ego and my pride. It's all of
Yeah.
those things. They all come in. They all come in. Yeah.
But and on the other side of where we let down pride, I do think just observationally from people and even of watching men that there's freedom and there's actually real confidence. I think we're taught artificial
Mm.
confidence, which is the avatar, right? Like the persona that we put on that looks tough and manly, but you can't really bullshit for that long. You can't. Eventually that's going to come out. You get in an intimate relationship and let me tell you, all your stuff inside is going to come out, where our weaknesses come out, all that, because we're meant to work through them and get them processed. And we can't do that if they're not coming out and there's not someone reacting to them, you know? And so on the other side of
Mm.
that, I think there's so much more actual freedom and real confidence. And that is much more masculine
Mm.
when a person has real confidence than artificial confidence.
I think humility is as well. I think humility
Yeah.
is an incredibly attractive quality. And I think
Yeah.
on the other side of pride is humility, you
Yep.
know, and humility is vulnerability and opening up and be
Yep.
authentic. And and when people do that, I always engage with it, you know, I think it's cool as fuck. I don't
Yeah.
know if I can swear on this podcast, so I'm doing it
Yeah.
anyway. You're going
No,
to have to
you're
bleep it
good.
out. But
No, you're good.
but I do it. It again. It's very endearing, you know,
Mhm.
and you feel
Mhm.
close to someone. You know, those guys that you meet or these people that you meet, and they're so comfortable in themselves, and you're like, wow, I
Yes.
could just listen to you all day.
Yeah.
Why can't I be like this
Yeah.
motherfucker? Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like,
Yeah.
you know, come on, you know. So I think sometimes if you see something that you want, do your best to try and get it. Do you
Mhm.
not to not be authentic, but if you see someone's really comfortable with themselves, just give it a go. And a lot
Mhm.
of the time, people who are very comfortable with themselves, they put themselves down.
Yeah.
I have to work at putting myself down. Trust me. You know,
Mhm.
I got to. My ego is daily basis. I've got to challenge myself to kind
Mhm.
of do certain things that help me put myself down and
Mhm.
consider other people, consider the world around me. And when I do that, I let life in. I let people in, and I
Mhm.
feel that connection. And life is good, and the day's amazing. You know, on the days I don't do that, and other things take priority, all
Mhm.
of that great stuff goes. All of that good stuff goes.
And do you
Yeah.
not end up feeling better about yourself though? Like when you do things like that, do you not end up feeling better
Mm.
like in your own vessel?
I feel so much better.
Yeah.
Making that spiritual contact
Mhm.
with another person. I feel so much better.
Mhm.
You know, so much better. It's what it feels like. What it feels like. I know using a word. It feels like life.
Yep.
It
Yep.
feels like life.
Mhm. Yeah.
Living,
Yep.
being. Yeah.
Mhm. So, Jonathan, this has been so amazing. I really appreciate all your stuff. I think this was really a necessary thing to talk about. I talk about mental health a lot,
Mm,
but I especially love having men on here. Every once in a while, I've had some really impactful men on the show, and it's been awesome having you contribute to that. Just because it
it's been
balance it
great.
out. It's easy to have some of the women do it, you know, but I think we need more
Yeah,
men to
yeah.
do it too. And so, where can we find all of your stuff? Where can everybody find? We're going to find your, your book, Walk with Your Wolf. But just tell us where we
Amazon.
can keep finding you.
You can find it
Yeah.
on Amazon, and it's in Amazon in America. You can buy it in America on
Yep.
Amazon. I didn't know that until the other day. I was like,
I
"What? It's
bought
in
it. I
America,
bought it
man."
2 years ago. I got it 2 years ago in America.
I'm getting old. This is what happens. I don't realize these things. I'm so caught up in myself. This is what happens.
Yeah.
So yeah. So Amazon, you can get it, which is great. And I don't know if you've got the audio book, but you can buy it online. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. And you guys, I'm
Mm.
going to put links to his stuff in the bio too, so you can look at that too. But thank you so much, Jonathan. This has been an incredible interview, and thank you for everything you do.
Well, thank you for asking me, and I love what you're doing. It's absolutely fantastic.